In a decisive response, Iran's foreign ministry has recalled its ambassadors from London, Paris, and Berlin for consultations. This move comes just a day after the UN Security Council failed to pass a draft resolution proposed by Russia and China that sought a technical 6-month delay to the sanctions to maintain a space for cooperation with the IAEA. It is being described as a direct reaction to the irresponsible action by the European trio and as a sordid mess, asserting that their intent is confrontation, not constructive dialogue. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says Tehran will not allow IAEA inspectors to visit its nuclear sites after the activation of the snapback mechanism. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi drew a parallel to the failed military attacks by Israel and the U.S. on Iran's nuclear facilities in June, stating that the snapback mechanism will similarly fail to resolve the decades-long nuclear dispute. He emphasized that Tehran will never bow to Western pressure and that the only solution remains dialogue and diplomacy. Well, key questions now arise. What are the true objectives of the E3? Does the move signal the final death of the JCPOA? What strategic options does Iran have on the table? And what is the role of diplomacy in this new landscape? To analyze these critical issues, we are now joined tonight by Mr. Reza Vedadi, academic researcher and author, joining us from London, and Mr. Robert Fantina, author and journalist, joining us from Kitchener, Ontario. Well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank both of you, of course, for joining us during this hour's spotlight, this episode. Mr. Vedadi, I do want to start off with you, first of all. Let's go ahead and start off with, in your opinion, what is the primary motivation for the E3 to actually trigger this snapback mechanism specifically at this time? I mean, is it an independent move, or is it completely and entirely under the pressure of the United States?
I wouldn't use the word pressure. I would say it was in hand collaboration with the United States and Israel. They realized that the sanctions for the past 20, 30 years haven't worked. They realized that other political pressures didn't work. They realized that the war that they tried to instigate in June didn't work. They tried to use popular unrest or the Velvet Revolution style of regime change that they've done with other countries, like in Ukraine and other countries. That didn't work. So now they're attempting to put other pressures, and one of them is by bringing back, they believe the sanction, because China and Russia are disputing this legally. So they believe by bringing back this kind of pressure on Iran, they will try to put internal pressure on Iran. So cause division between different parts of Iranian political spectrum that says we should negotiate and not go to war. And also increase, for example, when they bring these snapback sanction discussions in, the Iranian currency devalues. They have people that they enable in Iran or support in Iran to fluctuate the currency and cause economic problems for the population. They've tried all the other mechanisms, so they also will use this as an excuse for Israel and the United States to possibly, if they want to attack and strike Iran again, as a pretext that Iran has, not abided by the JCPOA, and so is entitled to be attacked.
Well, let's go ahead and bring in Mr. Fantina. Mr. Fantina, let's look at some of the responses from Iran. We have Mr. Araghchi described this action as a sign of an intent to confront. Meanwhile, we have President Pezeshkian says that Tehran will, in capitalization, not allow the IAEA inspectors visit these nuclear sites. Do you believe the Europeans have now closed the window for diplomacy?
Yes, I think they have, and they've done it intentionally and very foolishly. The idea that these snapbacks are in any way legitimate is ludicrous. We remember when Donald Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018, Iran maintained the agreement for a full year, hoping that the European countries that are signatories to the JCPOA would find a way to continue to deal with Iran despite U.S. threats. Now, the snapbacks should be against the United States, England, France, and Germany instead of Iran, because they were the ones that violated this agreement. But the idea now that Iran will want to come to the bargaining table, will want to discuss the issues with these other countries, when these countries have proven that they're completely unfair, that their positions simply make no sense, this certainly closes any door to future diplomatic efforts. And it's self-defeating for the countries that voted to for the snapback sanctions, because this now precludes the IAEA from inspecting Iranian sites. So what has been accomplished? Nothing except more hostility against a sovereign nation that has done nothing to deserve it.
Well, Mr. Vedadi, if we break in some of the countries that did indeed stand up for another opportunity for Iran, another opportunity for the IAEA to actually reconsider their stance, we have yesterday, of course, they rejected the proposal, the draft proposal by China and Russia. Given the failure of this Russian-Chinese resolution at the Security Council, does this move signal a deeper rift, specifically between the Western and Eastern powers on that council?
100%. If you look at the resolution, wasn't trying to prevent the snapback that they're claiming are taking place now. What they were saying is we want to give 6 more months for negotiations to take place, and that's why we bring this resolution forward. However, now they have stated over a number of weeks now that the snapback mechanism was not applied correctly, and so it's not legitimate and void. And the Russians will be the next president of the council in October. So things are not looking good for the Western Bloc. They had this one card up their sleeve politically to try and put pressure on Iran through the UN. And they lost that card now, or they used it. And it will be an excuse for military action or strikes. However, they won't be able to impose any more sanctions, extra sanctions. And the previous sanctions were really against the oil and military sales. Now, we know that Iran doesn't really buy military equipment from anyone, and the oil that it sells is selling to the Chinese companies that are not interacting with the Americans, so they can't be sanctioned. And even now, recently, we saw that Iran has signed a nuclear 4 of 8 nuclear reactor agreement with Russia. So Russia has stated that even if the sanctions, the Europeans believe the sanctions have come back, they don't believe it is coming back because they've just signed a nuclear reactor agreement with Iran. So this is definitely, you could call it a rift. But what China is trying and Russia are trying to say is that we're trying to maintain the legitimacy of the UN. Because if the UN is going to be used willy-nilly and do whatever it wants against Iran or any other country it wants, then there will be no UN left within a few years.
Mr. Fantina, I mean, wherever we do see problems in the region, we have to bring up the Zionist entity. What role has Israel played in encouraging actually the E3 to actually take this step? How should we analyze the regional implications of this decision, in your opinion?
Yeah, this is an important consideration. We have to remember that England and France, the very recent, in the last few days, recognized the state of Palestine. And that, of course, is displeasing to the United States and to the Zionist entity. So they had to do something to show their fealty to Israel. And this is one of the things that they can do to accomplish that. Now, this makes no sense, of course, because if we're talking about international law, if we're talking about justice and human rights, then such considerations as bowing to pressure from Western nations, from powerful Western nations, should not be a consideration. But these countries, England, France, and Germany, have done so. The Zionist entity has long considered Iran its mortal enemy. In June, when it attacked Iran, it expected, the leaders of Israel expected a quick and easy victory. They were very disappointed and only survived because they called on the United States to rescue them. So there is always the role of Israel in any kinds of problems and any kind of diplomatic breaks within the Middle East. Israel often has a hand in it, and of course the United States does too, and their goal is never peace and justice, it's power and profits.
Well, Mr. Vedadi, let's go ahead and go over a bit too. As we know, Iran has time and time again shown that they want the best of the interests of their own nation, their sovereignty and their rights, basically. When Mr. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi talked about the pooling of the ambassadors, is the recall of the ambassadors from these countries basically a precursor to a complete severance of diplomatic ties with these countries, in your opinion? Or is it basically preliminarily a strong statement of position from Iran?
If they really wanted to hit the West really hard, they would have blocked all of the NPT agreements and kicked out no more negotiations with the IAEA and just stopped all cooperation. So Iran, if you look at Iran's history, its diplomatic doctrine isn't to cut ties with countries. So it recalls its ambassador to show it's unhappy with the approach of the EU3, but I don't think they will close their embassy. Don't forget, these countries have large Iranian populations. These Iranian populations require services from the Iranian consulates. It's only the West that always closes Iranian consulates. And if you look at in a couple of years ago, after the Mahsa Amini riots, the Germans closed the Iranian Frankfurt consulate, and it's the Germans that have been putting pressure on Iranian mosques or Iranian institutions. So Iranians are just showing that they're unhappy with the approach, but we have to see how the Europeans will, what step they'll take next, because they've used this card and it hasn't worked so far. But will they use it to cause economic pressure on Iran internally? We have to see in the next week how that works out.
Well, exactly. When we're talking about the Iranian economy, I mean, overall, Mr. Fantina, do you see this new crisis a serious threat to Iran's national security, or is it basically an opportunity to break free from a failed framework and define new rules of engagement?
Yes, I think it's the latter. The Iranian government has dealt with sanctions for years. My contacts in Iran tell me that they're difficult and they're challenging, but the Iranian people, with their technology, their business acumen, their education, they're able to manage despite the sanctions. And we're going to see more and more of that. We're going to see Iran reaching out more to other friendly nations, China, Russia, for example, possibly India, to increase their trade, increase their technological expertise, which they have quite a bit of within the country as it is. They will seek out trade agreements with other nations, thus blocking the impacts of the sanctions from the West. This is the sign of a strong nation, one that has undergone unjust challenges in the past and has dealt with them and will continue to deal with them in the future. So while these are difficult and challenging, especially for the average person, the average citizen in Iran, it is something that the Iranian people will deal with. They're proud of their revolution, they're proud of their nation, and they're not going to bow to Western pressure.
Well, let me go ahead and branch off from Mr. Fantina's answer and bring over to you, Mr. Vedadi. He was mentioning about what he believes perhaps that Iran will be reaching out to others as they have been doing lately. And this is a very complex situation, as we do know. And what should the top priority actually be for Iran at this moment, specifically for Iranian diplomacy? Should they reach out and find new allies? And according to, as Mr. Fantina said, should they have maximum resistance, or should they keep channels open for future dialogue, possibly with Europe?
Well, Ayatollah Raisi, before he passed away, he always said that we will negotiate with whoever negotiates with us respectfully. However, we will not sit around for negotiations. So that should be the doctrine of this administration in Iran as well, where they recently, just in the last week or so, signed a new preferential trade agreement with Oman, for example. They're increasing their activities on the ports of free trade that they have in Chabahar and Avand and Kish. If you look at Iranian websites, there's exhibitions on a weekly basis or multiple occasions in Iran. So the country is not standing still. However, it does need support from the government, the strongest aspect of to push the economy forward and to increase its trade with its neighbors. Or, the bilateral countries around Iran is about 15 countries. That's not a small group. And you have countries, as we said, China and Russia already, we know India already. But there's also African market that it can tap. It can provide a lot of machinery, a lot of raw equipment, a lot of services to these countries, which it does already. So if the government continues to support the economy and the military is doing what it always has done, which is strengthening itself anyway, then there isn't much the West, especially Europeans and the Americans, can do. And Israel cannot do anything without the support of the US and Europe. Israel is beholden to them, is part of their colonial outpost. And without their permission and without their cooperation, Israel cannot do much. And it fears that Iran's strength economically will support the countries that are on the axis of resistance. So Lebanon, we saw Dr. Ali Larijani just go to Lebanon again today to show his support for the Lebanese, especially the 1-year anniversary of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and Iraq and all of these countries. And so if Iran is economically strong and militarily we know it's strong, there isn't much the West can do. And so this kind of tide of going to the east, the increase of economy around the world and the strength of economy cannot be stopped then.
Well, when we're talking about the IAEA, whether we're speaking about the NPT, we have to bring up the JCPOA. Mr. Fantina, considering the recent positions, can we actually declare that the JCPOA is officially and completely dead at this position? And should we be looking for an entirely new framework to try to solve this dispute?
Yes, absolutely. The JCPOA is dead. It's been dead for a long time now. And it's astonishing to me that of these European countries, these Western nations, have implemented these snapback mechanisms when it is they who violated the JCPOA. There needs to be a new agreement that will resolve these issues and conflicts. When Donald Trump withdrew from JCPOA in 2018, he said that the Iranian government would come crawling back to him in no time at all for a better deal. Well, it's been 7 years, and there's no sign of that ever happening. So the Iranian government will again approach this from a position of strength, not weakness. The Iranian government, as has been mentioned, is strong militarily and economically, and it was the one party to the JCPOA that maintained it for a full year after the United States and the European signatories violated it. So we will see, if there's going to be any agreement at all, it will be a brand new one. The JCPOA is at the point it can't be resurrected now. It is dead, and it's time to move forward. The Iranian government knows that. I don't think the Western nations have quite come to that conclusion yet, but that is reality, and they'll have to deal with it.
Well, Mr. Vedadi, as we have been seeing, we've been waiting for some time for this decision to come from the Security Council, and they have indeed reinstated these sanctions on Iran. What is a short-term forecast for this crisis, in your opinion, or is it perhaps further escalation of tensions?
Well, short-term, I think it will impact Iranian currency fluctuation. There's a lot of speculators and traders, unfortunately, in Iran who take advantage of these situations to make money. After that, once it stabilizes, I think Iranian businesses, economy will continue as it has, because no economic extra burden will be added from the sanctions that are supposed to be imposed by the Europeans, which the Chinese and the Russians do not accept. So then what we will do is you will see that Iranians will now have the JCPOA kind of sword removed over their head. They'll be free to venture forth and find new avenues of economy and relationships. And this idea of negotiation, we'll have to see what will they be negotiating? Why are they negotiating? And if they would negotiate, would it be like the JCPOA, where Iran for 10 years kind of gave everything that the Europeans and the Americans asked for, but in return received absolutely nothing? So it was a 10-year project that cost Iran a lot, but it didn't give anything back in return. The cost to benefit ratio was completely against Iran. So I think Iranians not having the JCPOA are now free to venture forth with the other BRICS countries and African countries and South American countries and develop new economic routes and trade and diplomatic relations.
Well, Mr. Fantina, whether we're looking at people vetoing, the decision to stop the genocide in Gaza, whether we're talking about who is pressuring the E3 to continue these sanctions on Iran, we have to look towards the U.S., as we have seen. President Pezeshkian, during his latest interview, stressed that the U.S. President Donald Trump has been boasting again about bringing peace to the region. But the path he has chosen would set the entire region on fire. Can we already say that the region is on fire, in your opinion?
Well, the region isn't entirely on fire yet, but it is. The fuse is burning, certainly. The actions of Donald Trump have done nothing to foster peace in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world, for that matter. As you mentioned, he's vetoed the ceasefire in Gaza and thus continued the genocide. His sanctions, the reimposition of sanctions against Iran are not the sign of a peaceful gesture. The consequences of any of these issues, the support, his continued support of Israel, which has bombed 7 different countries in the last several weeks, this is not a position of peace. This is a position of aggression, of injustice, of violation of international law. So Donald Trump's proclamations about bringing peace to the region are just a lie. They're a myth that exists only in his own brain. And the potential for disaster is there. It could happen momentarily. It will require cooler heads, such as the leaders of Iran and some other Middle Eastern countries and some other Western countries, to maintain some semblance of peace, hopefully bring an end to the genocide very soon, and to enable or to encourage Iranian alliances with different countries, or with strengthening alliances in trade and military with countries that it is currently working with. This will all be done despite U.S. efforts, not because of them.
Well, Mr. Vedadi, I mean, for too long, as we did mention, all that Iran, all the Islamic Republic of Iran has ever wanted was its rights to be implemented. All they have done was fight against the oppressed, and they have been looking for the interests of their people, as any other person around the world, their freedom and their rights. Mr. Vedadi, do you see one day the Islamic Republic of Iran actually having these sanctions officially lifted and achieving their own rights?
So I think that's the key. What he said is that Iran is a country that is resisting the West. And that's the key point that has the West for the last 40, 50 years trying to dismantle Iran and regime change Iran. And I think that we have to look past sanctions and the Western sanctions. As we discussed, and I think on many shows that Press TV and just even the West has acknowledged now that the swing of power is moving away from the West. And it's going towards the East. And when I say East, I don't mean just East, but, you know, the global South, through the BRICS, Africa, South America, all of these countries. The West is losing its colonial power that it had. It's at the final stages of that power. And so Iran doesn't necessarily need for the sanctions to ever be removed. It just needs to continue to survive, and it will thrive. And once the swing of power has shifted enough, Iran will be one of those pillars of the multipolar power, multipolar world that we will have. And it will work with other countries, because other countries like China and India and Russia and African countries have seen that Iran follows the morals and the rules that are set to defend, as you said, the oppressed. And it's not a country of oppressors. So they will look forward to trading Iran once the Americans and the Europeans are so weakened that no one's really then afraid of them.
Well, with that, gentlemen, I'm afraid our time has run out. As always, I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Reza Vedadi, academic researcher and author, joining us from London. And of course, as always, Mr. Robert Fantina, author and journalist, joining us from Kitchener, Ontario. A pleasure to have you both with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.